In the Sibuyan Sea, Musashi, one of the two heaviest and largest armed battleships ever assembled, faced the onslaught of American air power. The sky and sea had turned into a battleground as U.S. aircraft descended upon the defiant giant to send her to the depths. 4 waves of hellish torpedoes, strafing runs, and dozens of bombs had pierced Musashi's heart. She was fighting alone against more than 40 enemy aircraft, and more enemy reinforcements were coming. Nonetheless, her anti-aircraft fire had erupted in a desperate defense. The multiple explosions had battered Musashi and decimated her crew, but she had weathered the storm with the resilience of a Japanese warrior. The sea had witnessed a clash of steel and fire, and Musashi was its center. She was the jewel of the Imperial Japanese Navy and the only threat to American victory in the Pacific. Musashi was on her last dying breath, but she was not going to beg for mercy. If she was going down, she'd take with her as many war trophies as she could. Yamato-class battleship Musashi stood as a testament to Imperial Japanese naval might. Stretching over 860 feet and weighing a staggering 73,000 tons, she was an imposing floating fortress. Armed with 9 colossal 18 1-inch guns, the largest ever mounted on a battleship, Musashi's decks echoed with the ultimate power of naval supremacy. Her armor, a shield over 16 inches thick, embodied an impregnable front wall of metal. Propelled by 4 sets of mighty turbines, Musashi was envisioned to traverse the oceans with a blend of Japanese grace, power, and terror. At the time of their construction, Musashi and her older sister ship, Yamato, were the heaviest and most powerful armed battleships ever constructed. They were an act of defiance against the grip of Western powers, and a symbol of Japan's divine mission to conquer all of Asia and the Pacific. The imposing Musashi was commissioned at Nagasaki during the first week of August 1942, and promptly assigned to the 1st Battleship Division, where her sister ship, Yamato, and dreadnoughts Nagato and Mutsu were already serving. Once the trials were completed and her guns roared across the vast open sea, Musashi was fitted with the rest of her secondary armament, including her 12 127mm guns, 12 25mm guns, and the rest of her anti-aircraft guns in mid-September. As the tide of the war slowly changed against the Empire of Japan in January 1943, Musashi was assigned to the combined fleet of the Imperial Japanese Navy under the command of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Musashi arrived at Truk Atoll in the Central Pacific later in the month to replace her sister ship Yamato as the combined fleet's flagship. Musashi left for Rabaul, New Britain in April to direct Operation Ego. The ambitious operation was envisioned to counter the American military advance in the Solomon Islands and New Guinea through an aggressive campaign of aerial supremacy. Unfortunately for Musashi and Admiral Yamamoto, Operation Ego was compromised after Magic, an allied crypto analysis project, intercepted and deciphered the orders. The U.S. military immediately launched Operation Vengeance to hunt down Yamamoto and dispatched a squadron of Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighters to go after him. The Americans succeeded and intercepted the Admiral's transport aircraft over Bougainville, New Guinea on April 18, 1943, leading to the loss of one of Japan's most important generals. Despite the defeat, Musashi and her massive crew continued touring the Pacific in search of the enemy, seeking to lure them out for one decisive engagement. The U.S. Navy launched Operation Landgrab in May 1943 to regain control of the island of Attu as part of the Aleutian Islands campaign. These territories off the coast of Alaska had been occupied by Japan since 1942 to launch aerial attacks against American territories and fend off any nearby naval operations. Now, the U.S. was ready to take back its Arctic islands with an amphibious assault. On May 17th, responding to the American assaults on Attu, the mighty battleship Musashi, accompanied by the aircraft carrier Hio and a sizable fleet, set sail to the northern Pacific. Yet, finding no American forces, the Japanese task force redirected to Kure on May 23rd, carrying Admiral Yamamoto's ashes for a state funeral. Although reinforced for a counterattack on Attu, the island fell before Musashi could intervene with all the might of her guns. Captain Keizo Komura took command of the battleship on June 9th. While undergoing overhaul at Yokosuka Naval Arsenal in late June, Emperor Hirohito and senior naval officers visited Musashi. Fitted with advanced Type 22 radars in late July, she sailed for Truk as the flagship for Admiral Mineichi Koga. In mid-October 1943, suspecting American raids on Wake Island, Musashi led a fleet of 3 carriers, 6 battleships, and a dozen cruisers in vain, as no enemy ships were sighted. She spent the rest of 1943 in the waters of Truk, under Captain Bunji Asakura's command. The ship's crew was eager for combat. Every man wanted to see the colossal Yamato-class ship in action, roaring like a beast when firing her large-caliber naval guns. Still, this decisive moment did not come. Musashi remained in Truk Lagoon until February 1944, when she sailed for Yokosuka. The war in the Pacific had forced the once aggressive Empire of the Rising Sun to adopt a defensive posture to hold the territories it had conquered before the decisive defeats at Midway and the Coral Sea. The back and forth between the Japanese home islands and the rest of the Pacific led to crew fatigue, but the sailors did their duty. On February 24th, Musashi successfully delivered 1 Imperial Japanese Army battalion and a Special Naval Landing Force battalion to reinforce Palau. During the voyage, the battleship was struck by a typhoon, losing most of its deck cargo, but the ship was intact. After a month of monotonous rest, the sighting of American vessels and aircraft forced Musashi to leave Palau at midnight to avoid a dashing raid by the enemy. Immediately after Musashi's departure, USS Tunny, a Gato-class submarine, spotted the Steel Colossus and went after her to strike fast and claim the ultimate prize. After diving and following Musashi for hours, USS Tunny fired 6 torpedoes. Musashi maneuvered as fast as she could, and the men rushed to their battle stations to spot the enemy submarine, but it was too late. 5 enemy torpedoes missed, but the last one struck home, blowing a 19-foot hole near the bow and flooding the ship with over 3,000 tons of water. 7 crewmen lost their lives instantly, with another 11 injured as a result of secondary damage. USS Tunny vanished, leaving Musashi alone to tend her wounds. She set a course for the homeland and reached Kure Naval Arsenal on April 3, 1944, to be repaired. While at the Imperial Navy's arsenal, Musashi's anti-aircraft armament was drastically increased after removing her 6 1-inch triple turrets. Due to the submarine incident, Musashi was also fitted with new radars and depth charge rails mounted on her fantail. In May 1941, Rear Admiral Asakura took the helm, and Musashi, now part of the 1st Mobile Fleet under Vice Admiral Ozawa, steamed into the heart of the Pacific. Departing Tawi-Tawi in June, she initially geared up for Operation Kona, aiming to counter the American thrust into Biak. However, the tides of war swiftly shifted, leading Musashi into the tumult of the Battle of the Philippine Sea. In this clash, the battleship escaped direct assault, but the overall outcome was a catastrophe for Japan, with the Americans nicknaming the victory the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. A battered Second Fleet, including Musashi, returned to Japan after the Marianas debacle. In July, Musashi, now loaded with troops and equipment, set sail for Lingpa Island to strengthen the garrison. Captain Toshihira Inaguchi assumed command at Musashi on August 12, 1944. Due to his exceptional leadership, he was promoted to Rear Admiral in October. Shortly after that, Musashi embarked on a decisive journey to Brunei Bay, Borneo, in preparation for Operation Show 1, the bold Imperial Navy's counterattack against the American landings at Leyte. The strategic plan involved Vice Admiral Ozawa's carriers luring the American fleet north of Leyte, opening for Vice Admiral Kurita's 1st Diversion Force to enter Leyte Gulf and obliterate the enemy's landing forces. On October 22nd, Musashi departed Brunei in unison with Kurita's force, setting the stage for another decisive phase in the Pacific theater. The next day, the Gato-class submarine USS Dace dealt a blow to the Imperial Navy by sinking the heavy cruiser Maya near Palawan in the Philippines. Over 750 survivors were rescued by the destroyer Akishimo and were later transferred to Musashi. As the Japanese and American fleets approached each other in the Philippines, Musashi and her task force began transiting through the Sibuyan Sea that separated Luzon from Visayas. To Kurita's regret, Operation Show 1 was compromised when an American reconnaissance aircraft from USS Intrepid spotted his center force on October 24th. Hell broke loose 2 hours later when Intrepid dispatched a squadron of 8 Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers to obliterate the one target that stood from the rest, Musashi. The sailors dashed toward their battle stations and opened fire with the dozens of anti-aircraft guns Musashi had at her disposal. The sky turned black with the anti-aircraft fire surrounding the battleship. Nevertheless, it was not enough to fend off the Americans. One 500-pound bomb struck the roof of turret number 1, but failed to penetrate. Less than 5 minutes later, Musashi's defenses were breached again by a Grumman TBF Avenger that scored a torpedo hit starboard amidships. This caused the battleship to take on 3,000 long tons of water. Musashi listed 5.5 degrees to starboard, which was later reduced to 1 degree by counter-flooding compartments on the opposite side. While the crew dealt with this impact, the gunners shot down 2 Avengers approaching to bomb Musashi. The Americans resumed the attack 2 hours later. 8 more Helldivers swooped in for another round. One bomb did not detonate, hitting the upper deck, but another penetrated 2 decks and exploded above an engine room, causing severe damage. Despite the power loss, 2 Helldivers were shot down by anti-aircraft fire before they could inflict more damage on Musashi. However, reinforcements were coming, and the U.S. Navy was unwilling to give up its valuable prey. The third wave of American fighters, comprised of 9 Avengers, attacked Musashi from both sides. 3 torpedo hits struck the port side, damaging 1 turret, flooding the machinery room, and damaging the engine room. At 1 p.m., the U.S. Navy dispatched the 4th and final wave to finish off Musashi for good. Over 30 aircraft were launched from carriers Essex and Lexington. 2 Hellcat fighters strafed the battleship's deck, while Helldivers slammed 4 bombs near Musashi's forward turrets. The chaos intensified as 4 more torpedoes found their mark, breaching the mighty warship. Once an indomitable force, Musashi listed 1 degree to starboard, her bow plunging 13 feet beneath the waves. The relentless assault throttled her speed to a mere 20 knots. In the ensuing 2-hour frenzy, 9 Helldivers from USS Enterprise, armed with 1,000-pound armor-piercing bombs, swooped down for another wave of destruction. Their payload scored 4 more hits on Musashi. Still, Musashi held the line. She was battered, but not ready to go down. The Americans, bewildered, struck 3 more times with torpedoes, crippling her speed to 13 knots. The battle raged until 3:25 p.m., when 37 USS Intrepid, Franklin, and Cabot aircraft closed in for the kill. Musashi was engulfed in bombs and torpedoes, absorbing 13 hits and 11 strikes. The Japanese Titan now limped at 6 knots. She was on her last breath after being struck by 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs. At 7 p.m., Kurita ordered the crew to abandon the ship. Over 1,300 of the 2,400 crew were rescued by other Japanese ships. Musashi, the sister ship of Yamato and the world's largest battleship ever assembled, capsized at 7:30 p.m., finding a resting site at 4,430 feet.